This is part 5 of our 5-part video series. As we discussed in video 1, this tool is designed to assist organizations with prioritizing the best site on which to install green stormwater sites when looking at a large portfolio of sites. While this tool evaluates the risk of installing green stormwater infrastructure on brownfield sites, we are not advocating putting blinders on and ignoring the potential for contamination. This tool should be used in conjunction with the EPA's Implementing Stormwater Infiltration Practices at Vacant Parcels and Brownfield Sites document. Prior to the initiation of any brownfield site reuse or redevelopment, a site assessment should be done to evaluate the potential for contamination to exist. Knowledge regarding any potential contamination is needed to plan for any potential mitigation or remediation to make the property safe for occupation and to address environmental and possible ecological concerns in a safe and cost-effective manner. If contamination is suspected, an environmental investigation should be conducted before proceeding with the green stormwater infrastructure design and construction. One of the objectives of the investigation is to identify the location and size of the area where contaminant concentrations represent an unacceptable risk. Contamination at a site does not necessarily exclude stormwater management practices that include infiltration. There may be instances where stormwater management approaches that can include infiltration may be appropriate on a site with contamination. Stormwater management approaches that include infiltration need to be carefully evaluated when being considered for a brownfield site or potentially contaminated property. For those sites where infiltration practices are not advisable, it may be possible to use green infrastructure practices such as green roofs and biofiltration designs to manage stormwater and also protect groundwater. A perfect example of this might be a rain garden with liner and underdrain or overflow pipe that conveys excess water to a storm sewer. The plants and soil will still filter the stormwater, some evapotranspiration will occur, and it will lessen volume of stormwater reaching the stormwater during the peak capacity time. When approaching contamination, there are several things you want to consider. In particular, you want to be on the lookout for LNAPL and DNAPL. Although these terms may sound technical, they simply refer to liquids that are not dissolved in water. For instance, you may have heard that oil and water don't mix. Think of this as the oil part of that mixture. An LNAPL would be a liquid that floats on top of water, and DNAPL is the opposite, it sinks. Common LNAPL and DNAPLs are gasoline, diesel, and other petroleum products as well as solvents, like dry cleaning fluids. You also want to be on the lookout for contaminants that might leach out of the soil into groundwater, such as herbicides or volatile organic compounds or biodegradable waste, like garbage. Other contaminants, such as many metals, are less likely to be a problem. You will also want to be on the lookout for groundwater contamination. Generally speaking, if the groundwater beneath the site is known to be contaminated, infiltration is not recommended. The movement of contaminants in groundwater can be accelerated by an infiltration practice potentially resulting in environmental impacts to neighboring properties. However, there could be situations where infiltration practices can be implemented depending on the specific circumstances, including the compounds and concentrations present in the groundwater plume. An example might be a situation where natural attenuation has been selected as the appropriate strategy for dealing with a groundwater plume with a low concentration of contaminants where there is little potential for off-site migration. Relatively clean rainwater infiltration down to the groundwater may have the effect of speeding up the natural attenuation process. You'll need to discuss this with an environmental consultant before proceeding. When approaching a contaminated site, you may want to look for parts of the property that are not impacted by contamination. Often, the entire brownfield property is not impacted or problematic material can be relocated to create an area that is not impacted by contamination. In planning to implement stormwater management at a brownfield site, the volume, location, and the thickness of contaminated areas should be reviewed. If an area of the site is not impacted or can be remediated to remove the contaminants, it may be appropriate to plan infiltration practices in those areas. For example, impervious surfaces such as asphalt parking lots or concrete building foundations, which limit the downward movement of contaminants in the soil as a result of rainfall and infiltration, can be placed over the areas with contamination while green infrastructure practices are located in other uncontaminated areas of the site. Finally, there may be occasions where you have conducted your environmental assessment and determined that contamination is unlikely at your site, only to discover an old oil tank or some other contamination at the site when you are installing your green stormwater infrastructure. If that happens, you should immediately consult an environmental professional to discuss your responsibilities and next steps. As you've seen in this video, in many cases, there are solutions that will allow you to reap the benefits of green stormwater infrastructure on vacant parcels and brownfield sites. We look forward to helping you prioritize the sites in your portfolio by evaluating the costs, benefits, and risks using the NJIT tab Green Stormwater Infrastructure Decision Tree tool. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by the New Jersey Institute of Technology's Technical Assistance to Brownfield Communities program, otherwise known as NJIT tab. Visit www.njit.edu/tab for more information.